The call came at 2:17 in the afternoon. I know the exact time because I was standing at the cemetery, still holding a single white rose I hadn't been able to put down yet. The ground was cold. The sky was the kind of gray that feels personal. My daughter Sophie was beside me, 8 years old, her small hand inside mine, and she hadn't let go since the morning. We had just buried her mother. My wife. Claire. I am 41 years old. Gone in 6 weeks from a diagnosis nobody saw coming. 6 weeks from the word cancer to the day we stood there in the cold, Sophie and I, with 100 other people who loved her and a hole in the earth that would never make sense. I let the call go to voicemail. Then I put the rose down, finally. I put it on top of the arrangement that had Claire's name spelled out in white flowers, and I stood there with my daughter, and I tried to simply breathe. On the drive home, I listened to the voicemail. It was my boss, Richard. His voice was professional. Measured. The kind of voice that has been trained to deliver uncomfortable news without catching on any of the discomfort. "Nathan," he said. "I need you to come in tomorrow. There are some changes we need to discuss." I deleted the message and drove my daughter home. My name is Nathan Greaves. I was 44 years old and I had worked at Callaway Financial Services for 11 years. I was a senior portfolio analyst. I had built real relationships with clients over those years. I had stayed late and come in early and answered emails on weekends when it mattered. The kind of employee you don't notice because the work is always done and the problems are always handled. Claire and I had met when we were both 26. She was a nurse. She had the quality that the best nurses have, the ability to be completely present with a person in their worst moment without making it about herself. She brought that quality home with her too. She was the steadiest person I had ever known. When she got sick, I took 3 weeks of leave to be with her through the treatment. I had the leave available, I hadn't taken a real vacation in 4 years. Richard had approved it in writing. When it became clear the treatment wasn't working, I took another week. Richard had approved that too. Also in writing. Sophie had her mother's eyes. She had stopped eating well in the weeks after the diagnosis. She had started sleeping with the light on. She was 8 years old and she was trying very hard to be brave, which is the saddest kind of brave there is. I had not told her anything about the voicemail. I made her soup for dinner. I sat with her until she fell asleep. Then I went to the kitchen and sat alone and tried to prepare for whatever tomorrow was going to be. The office was a 20-minute drive from our house. I had made that drive 11 years ago. It was the kind of drive you stop thinking about, automatic, routine, the shape of a life that has been lived consistently. Driving it the morning after Claire's funeral felt like moving through someone else's memory. Richard's office was on the 4th floor. Corner room, glass on 2 sides, the kind of space that communicates seniority clearly. He was behind his desk when I was shown in. He had 2 people with him, the HR director, a woman named Kathleen, and a man from the legal team whose name I had never learned. The presence of those 2 people told me everything before he said a word. Richard stood and offered his hand. "Nathan. Please sit down. And first, I want to say, on behalf of everyone here, how deeply sorry we are for your loss." "Thank you," I said. I sat. Kathleen had a folder in her hands. The legal man had a folder too. Richard sat back down and folded his hands on the desk. "This is difficult timing," he said, "and I want to acknowledge that. But we've been undergoing a structural review, and unfortunately your position has been identified for elimination." I looked at him. "We're restructuring the analysis division," he continued. "Your role specifically is being consolidated. We have a severance package prepared, it's generous, I think you'll find." "Today," I said. He paused. "I'm sorry. You're doing this today." A brief silence. "The review was finalized last week. We wanted to address it promptly." I looked at Richard. I looked at Kathleen. I looked at the legal man. None of them looked directly back at me. I picked up the folder Kathleen slid across the desk. I stood. I said, "I'll have someone review this." Then I walked out. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 40 minutes. I wasn't ready to drive. I wasn't ready to go home and tell Sophie that on top of everything else, her father didn't have a job. I was not ready for anything that came after walking out of that office. I had my phone in my hand and I called my sister, Janet, in Columbus. "They fired me," I said when she answered. "Today." Janet was quiet for a moment. She was the kind of person who absorbed information before responding. She had always been that way. "Today," she repeated. "The day after we buried Claire." Another silence. Then Janet said, "Nathan. Do not sign anything." "I haven't." "Good. Don't. I'm calling David." David was her husband, an employment attorney. Not one who specialized in wrongful termination specifically, but someone who would know someone who did. I drove home. I made Sophie breakfast for dinner because she asked for it, scrambled eggs and toast, the meal she associated with Sunday mornings when Claire used to make it. I sat across from her while she ate and watched her and thought about how entirely unfair it was that an 8-year-old should have to carry what she was carrying. "Are you sad, Dad?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "But I'm okay. And you're okay. And we're going to be okay." She considered this with the seriousness she applied to most things. Then she went back to her eggs. I believed what I had told her. Mostly. I needed to keep believing it. David referred me to an attorney named Patricia Moore. I met her 3 days after the termination. Her office was clean and direct, no unnecessary furniture, a desk between us, natural light from the window. She was in her early 50s, straightforward in the way that competent people sometimes are when they've stopped needing to impress anyone. She read through the termination documents. She asked me specific questions, about the leave, about the written approvals, about the exact timeline. She took notes in a precise, small handwriting. When I finished, she set her pen down. "The timing is the problem for them," she said. "You were terminated on the day following your wife's funeral. You had documented, approved bereavement leave. The structural review justification is vague, deliberately so, I think, and consolidating a senior role that has been consistently high-performing requires more documentation than this." "Is that the case?" I asked. "It's the beginning of one," she said. "But I want to be clear with you, Nathan, this will take time. And it will require you to be steady through it." "My wife was a nurse for 15 years, I said. "She was steady through things that would have broken most people. I can manage steady." Patricia looked at me for a moment. Then she nodded. "Good," she said. "Then let's get to work." The months that followed were difficult in the way that hard things are when they're quiet and long rather than loud and brief. I filed for unemployment. I began a careful job search, not frantic, but deliberate. Patricia had advised me not to take the first thing available, not to look desperate, to build from a position of as much stability as I could manage. That was easier said than lived with, but she was right and I knew she was right. Sophie went back to school. Her teacher, a woman named Mrs. Okafor, sent me a note in the second week that said simply, "Sophie is remarkable. She's going to be okay. So are you." I kept that note in my wallet. My former clients at Callaway began reaching out. I hadn't contacted any of them. Patricia had advised against it during the legal proceedings, but word had moved through the professional community the way it does. 3 separate people emailed me within the first month. One of them, a man named Gerald Hines who had been a client for 8 years, wrote, "I heard what happened. If you start something on your own, I want to be your first call." I read that email 4 times. At home, I cooked dinner every night. I helped Sophie with her homework. On Saturday mornings, I made scrambled eggs and toast because it was what she asked for and because I understood what it meant to her. I was keeping my word. We were going to be okay. Patricia called me in October, 4 months after the termination. We've received a response from Callaway's legal team, she said. They want to discuss a resolution. What kind of resolution? They're offering a settlement. Significantly higher than the initial severance. She named the number. I sat with it. What does accepting it mean? It means you sign a non-disclosure agreement and the matter is closed. You don't go to court. They don't admit wrongdoing. And if we don't accept, we proceed with the lawsuit. It could take another year, possibly 2. The outcome is not guaranteed. I believe we have a strong case, but nothing in litigation is certain. I looked at the kitchen table where Sophie was doing her homework, visible through the doorway. What would you do? I asked Patricia. A pause. I'd take the settlement, she said quietly. Not because the case is weak. Because you have a daughter, and you have a life to rebuild, and 2 more years of this is 2 more years of this. I thought about Claire. I thought about what she would say. She would say, take the money, Nathan. Build something. Stop fighting the past and go toward what's next. Set up the meeting, I said. The settlement meeting was in a conference room in Patricia's building. Callaway sent their legal team. Richard was not present, which, Patricia told me afterward, was standard. I was glad. I wasn't certain I could have been in a room with Richard and maintained the composure the moment required. I signed the agreement. I shook hands with people whose names I would not remember. I walked out with Patricia into the corridor. How do you feel? She asked. Like something closed, I said. And like something else might be opening. She smiled. That's usually how it goes. That evening I called Gerald Hines. I told you to call when you were ready, he said. I'm ready, I said. We talked for an hour. Gerald had been thinking about it for months. He had colleagues who felt the same way about Callaway's direction as he did, who wanted something different. More personal. More accountable. The kind of financial services relationship that had become rare. What would you need to start something? Gerald asked. I told him. I had been thinking about it too, in the quiet honest hours, at the kitchen table after Sophie was asleep. I can make some calls, Gerald said. Give me 2 weeks. I thanked him. I said good night. I sat in the kitchen for a long time in the quiet and felt, for the first time in months, that the ground beneath me was solid. Greaves Financial opened its doors on a Monday morning in February. A small office in a building downtown, 2 rooms, a receptionist's desk, my name on the door in simple lettering. It was nothing like Callaway's marble lobby and glass floors. It was exactly right. Gerald was the first client. He brought 2 colleagues. Patricia referred a friend who needed investment advice and trusted her judgment. The first month was small. The second was slightly larger. I worked carefully and honestly and with the particular attention of someone who understands that trust is not given, it is earned, slowly, through consistent truth-telling over time. Sophie came to the office one afternoon after school. She sat in the chair across from my desk the way a serious person sits and looked around the room. Is this yours? She asked. Yes, I said. Like, really yours? Really mine? She looked at my name on the door, visible through the interior window. She looked at me. Mom would like this, she said. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice immediately. I waited a moment. Yeah, I said. She would. Sophie picked up a pen from my desk and turned it end over end. Can I come here after school sometimes? Instead of the sitter? Yes, I said. You can come here whenever you want. She nodded and put the pen down and pulled her homework out of her bag. I turned back to my screen. We worked in the same room in the same quiet, and it was the most at home I had felt in a very long time. The first anniversary of Claire's death came on a Thursday. Sophie and I went to the cemetery in the morning, before school, because she asked to go before school. She carried a small bouquet she had chosen herself from the flower shop near our house. White and yellow. She said those were the colors that looked most like her mom. We stood together at the grave the way we had stood a year before, but differently now. Sophie was taller. I was different in ways I was still learning to name. She laid the flowers down carefully. "Do you think she knows?" Sophie asked. "About the business?" "I do," I said. "Do you think she knows about me? Like, how I'm doing in school now and everything?" "Everything," I said. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she took my hand, not the frightened grip of a year ago, but something steadier. "I miss her every day," she said. "Me too," I said. "Every single day." We stood there a little longer. The morning was cool and clear, nothing like the gray of the year before. The sky was pale blue, the kind that holds the promise of a real day. Then Sophie looked at her watch and said, practically, "I'm going to be late." I laughed. She looked up at me, surprised by the laugh, and then she smiled too. We walked back to the car together. I drove her to school. I went to my office. I opened my door, sat at my desk, and began the work of a day in a life that was mine, built from loss and difficulty and the quiet, stubborn decision to keep going. What Richard did was wrong. It was cruel in the specific way that institutional cruelty is cruel, not passionate, not personal, just indifferent. He made a professional calculation on the worst day of my life, and he was wrong about what it would cost me. He thought it wouldn't something. It ended the wrong chapter. And it opened the right one.